In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to create a grunge portrait in Adobe Photoshop. For my students, go ahead, go to Canvas and download the assets. Within the assets, you'll find several different things. You'll find some brushes, you're going to find some textures, and you'll find the John Lennon image. Go ahead and do a file open or open with for the John Lennon and open it up in Photoshop. Let's also go back to those assets and within Grunge Brushes, I want you to just double click and install each of those brushes for me because it'll make your life a lot easier as we go along. So I'm just going to double click each of them. And this is installing those brushes, so when we go to use them, they'll be there. So if we go here under brushes, if we now look, we see that we have those 4 different kinds of brushes that we just installed, which we will be using later. And mine's set to ginormous, which we don't need quite yet. All right, let's go ahead and look at our John Lennon picture. Let's go ahead and unlock it. Let's do a image. Let's do a file save as first. So we've still got our original. Let's save it as first initial, last name, underscore grunge portrait, ng portrait. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in my grunge portrait file and say save. Alright, I've got my brush on still. Let's go ahead and go to image size, and take a look at what we've got. Depending on where you're going to use it and how big, take a peek at this part. So I want to use it for print, so assuming I'm going to use this for publication, let's move it up to 300. My height right now is 11.36, so it's a little bit taller than a piece of paper, but not quite as wide. For my purposes, that'll work just fine. So I'm going to make sure I got my preserve details on and say OK. So next thing I need to do is find the type of texture that I want to use on this. So let's go ahead and go into that folder that you downloaded earlier and look at your different kinds of paper textures. So go back into where it was. And you've got paper textures. So you see, change it to view extra large. You've got quite a few different things here available. I'm going to go ahead and choose this paper 8 as what I'm going to use. So I'm going to go into my photo. I'm going to go to File and Place. And I want to place embedded, which means I want to make or place linked. I want to make a smart object out of it. So I'm going to go into my paper textures and I'm going to grab the texture that I want to use. So I chose paper 8. I'm going to say place. And it's going to come in. I want to go ahead and make sure I cover the whole thing. So make it a little bit bigger. And I hit OK. Now you're going to see that it's going to come in as a smart object. So one of the first things I want to do is play with my smart object because I want to make it even more obvious that I've got these textures under here. So I'm going to double click on my smart object. I'm going to come in here. Let's go to Image. I'm going to do some destructive editing, adjustments, and levels. And I'm going to run and push this way over so that I'm really getting a lot of that texture in, because that's going to be what's going to help show through in what I'm creating. And I'm going to go ahead and push save. I'm not going to change the name of it. I'm going to go ahead and push close. So now you can see it's definitely very yellow, and that's okay. I'm not really worried about the yellows part at all. I'm going to turn the visibility for the paper off for a moment, and let's go ahead and look at our John Lennon photo. And let's go ahead and go to Image, Adjustments, and let's go ahead and go to Levels again. And we really want to push the contrast on this. So I'm going to bring my levels over. So you can see you kind of change where those light and dark tones are. I usually just bring them into the edge of the histogram and say OK. And then I want to go up to Filter. I want to come down to Filter Gallery. I'm going to make it much smaller so I kind of see what's going on. And I want to go ahead and choose Watercolor. And let's go ahead, so it's artistic and watercolor. You can change how much detail, more or less, up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there and say OK. So now I've got kind of the dotted look going on, which is just fine. It's going to work perfectly for what I need it to do. So then I'm going to go ahead and above my paper layer, I want to go ahead and add a new layer. So I'm going to come here to my layers and add new layer. Alright, so now I've got a place where I'm going to put some information. I'm going to go back to my image that I've got of my person. Come here to channels. And you'll see all my channels now have his face on them. Actually, no, I want to stay on my top layer and go to channels. And I want to go ahead and hit Control click that RGB, so it's going to go ahead and select those items for me. I'm going to come back here into layers. I'm going to hit my layer mask. And I'm going to make a mask of his face. And I'm going to deselect, so Command D if you've got things still going. With the mask thumbnail selected, which is where I am right now, I'm going to hit Command I and invert, so now it kind of looks like a ghost image. And I can now go down here to my original and turn him off and turn my paper back on. So it looks like I don't have anything going on. We're actually about to paint. So let's go ahead and go to our paint brushes. And let's go ahead. I've had good luck with the Spoon Graphics subtle brushes here. So grab one of those brushes and decide on the size. I like to make them really big. So if you're always go over here, you can kind of see how big it is. I'm going to choose a really nice bright color. So let's choose a bright red. And you can change the size of that brush with your square brackets. And I'm going to go ahead and start clicking. Nope, still making gray. I want to make red. Oh, make sure you are on your, not on that part, on the mask part, you're on the thumbnail. Alright, now I'm going to start clicking. And I'm going to go ahead, grab another brush. And maybe another color. And you'll see as you start clicking, his face is going to start coming through. So it's totally up to you as to how you're going to color this, what you're going to do with it, what kind of brushes you're going to use. Some of the different kinds of brushes, you'll see that in the Grunge Brushes, you've got this sampled brush. You can make them really, really big. Click here, make it a bit bigger. Totally up to you as to how you're going to play with making this work. If you don't like it, you can always undo, go back in your history. Say I don't like any of that green. So I'm going to go back in my history a few. And maybe there's a corner one that I can try. Maybe I want to make it really small. So you can always rub it around. Do a few different things with it until you get to the color selection that you like. So you can do it just with the small, just the really bright colors. You can do just one color. You have to kind of watch with these ones that are square because you don't want to get a lot of big lines. So I usually try to make it bigger than my paper. Oh, don't love that. Undo. So maybe I don't like that grunge one at all. So let's go back to these Spoon Graphics ones as well. Where'd my Spoon Graphics go? Here we go. Alright, so I've got some kind of orange going on. Let's add some more blue in. Kind of like the blues. Until you get it kind of the way you like it. Once you've got it relatively good, let's go ahead and add a frame to it. So we're going to grab our rectangle. And we're going to draw a rectangle over the whole thing. We want our fill to be nothing. We do want to have a stroke, but we want our stroke to be kind of a off-white. And let's go ahead and make it 20 points or so. Come over here to your properties on your stroke. And we want to make sure that on our properties of our stroke, right here, that we are choosing to color inside, so it makes it bigger inside. Let's go ahead and change that stroke into an overlay. So it kind of gets that color on it as well, a little less obvious. And let's take the opacity down, maybe to like 80% or so. So that's a very simple way to make a grunge portrait in using textures in Photoshop.